Alan Moore looks like a combination of Rubeus Hagrid, Gandalf, and your estranged uncle you see once every 10 years or so. He's an interesting character, to say the very least. While I don't agree with all of his beliefs, particularly those towards comics, superheroes, and mainstream adaptations of fiction, I do with the ones related to people and society themselves, social acceptance, rights and freedoms, culture, history, that sort of thing. He's a very open guy, against a lot of extreme conservative ideologies, much like myself, and I respect that, especially from someone his age. He's well informed and does his research, seeking knowledge and not blatantly ignoring it. Alan Moore knows his craft too, and that craft is writing. He's one of, if not the, greatest writers to ever grace the comic book medium. He's won numerous awards for his critically acclaimed work, such as Watchmen, V for Vendetta, and The League of Extraordinary Gentlemen. He helped breathe new life and vitality into the character of Swamp Thing, one of my personal favorites, and even wrote one of the best Superman storylines, Whatever Happened to the Man of Tomorrow. One of my favorite works from Moore is his epic poem in the form of a romantic letter called The Mirror of Love, which goes through the entire history of same-sex love throughout mankind's existence, as well as its state within culture today. Moore also wrote a story for Batman in 1988 called The Killing Joke. You may have heard of it before. Despite being one of the most successful, recognizable, and beloved comics of all time, Moore himself views it as nothing special, one of the weakest works of his career, possibly the weakest. He felt it didn't have a whole lot to say, that no one is really getting anything out of it, apart from showing you the similarities between two characters, Batman and the Joker. There's no significance to the narrative, at least in terms of anything human or tangible that you can apply to the real world, because the Batman and the Joker are not real themselves, they're absurd creations. Though he himself is not a fan of The Killing Joke, Moore does seem to understand why it has become so popular, why so many people view it as a masterpiece of sorts. It influenced so many stories that followed, not only found within Batman and DC, but also the rest of the industry as well. He feels that comic book characters, once created in the 1930s, 40s, 50s, and 60s, were created for the sole purpose of innocent entertainment for children and have become too pretentious in the present day. Writers have made the characters and stories too dark and grim. Everyone seems to be psychologically disturbed now, violent. He believes that superheroes, especially the ones from the Golden and Silver Ages, were never meant to carry with them this kind of emotional baggage. Like a lot of stances Alan Moore has taken over the years, I find this one to be really fascinating. However, in the world of fiction, I think saying these types of characters and stories cannot, or I guess should not, possess these types of darker, real-world characteristics to be kind of odd. I get that they may be too grim or inappropriate in some instances with some of these characters, but ones like Batman, Joker, or any other similar characters for that matter? Superheroes aren't just for children. They all don't have to be kid-friendly all the time. If characters like Batman have proven anything over the years, it's that they can be written in a variety of interesting ways, in comics or any other form of media. I think these characters can encompass many different tones, and be intended for both children and adults. It all depends on how you write them. I think Moore's outlook on superheroes is oversimplified and superficial, not to mention a little hypocritical, especially since he himself has instigated this type of creative mindset and direction in storytelling with these types of characters with some of his work, whether it was intentional or not. Superheroes and their stories can be a lot more than what they were in the olden days. Not all of them have to be cookie-cutter, morally black and white narratives with clearly defined sides. Characters like these can be psychologically disturbed. Stories featuring them can be dark and grim. Some even thrive with this kind of tone and have become stronger as a result. I think it comes down to personal taste. Moore just doesn't like the darker modern-age superhero. He prefers the classics, and feels they are what superheroes are supposed to be. But saying they can't be anything else, that they aren't made to carry some of this darker and grim emotional baggage, that feels very shallow to me, too simplistic. Times have changed, these characters have evolved, they've had to with an ever-changing world, and you can use this same argument with any form of fiction, not just comics and superheroes. Moore was partly responsible for the darker and violent shift comics went through in the 1980s. You get a sense that he's ashamed of what he did to these characters, that he's somehow ruined superheroes single-handedly. How he wrote them at that time destroyed what he loved so much about them in the first place, even if he didn't realize it in that moment. And I mean, that's just on him. There's nothing you or I can really say or do about it. It's what he believes, it's his opinion. If he's given up on superheroes, if he feels they have been stripped of everything that made them so great before, that's fine. I just don't agree with him on that. Superheroes are better than ever, and if it's about writers and creators not being innovative enough, drawing from the same well over and over again, then to that, I say look harder. The innovation is still there. I think Moore has just blinded himself to it at this point, because he doesn't care. He's moved on from this genre of storytelling. Anyways, let's finally get to my review of Batman: The Killing Joke. If this introduction felt a bit too long, I apologize, but I wanted to set the stage, bring up Alan Moore, and provide some context behind his thoughts and opinions towards this story, and why he views it as one of the weakest of his career, despite its long-lasting success and appeal with audiences. I want to thank Dorian Malia for nominating this story over on Patreon.com, and with that, we can finally dive right in. We begin with a close-up of a rain puddle outside the gates of Arkham Asylum as Batman enters. He and Commissioner Gordon walk down a corridor full of prison cells, holding some of Batman's deadliest foes. The Dark Knight enters one housing the Joker, as the Clown Prince of Crime is sitting at a table, playing charades. Batman tells his archenemy that he has come to talk about their lengthy feud, and that it will end, sooner or later, with one of them dead. Batman soon realizes that the man sitting across from him is not the Joker, just a decoy in his place. The Caped Crusader proceeds to brutalize the inmate for answers, wanting to know where the real Joker has went. We cut to an abandoned amusement park that Joker plans on buying, saying it's run down, ugly, and features countless life-threatening safety hazards. It's perfect, and he'll take it. After stating money is not an issue, we are presented with a flashback, the first of many, of an engineer who quit his job at a chemical company in order to become a stand-up comedian. His new career is proving fruitless, as he is unable to provide for his pregnant wife, and the two find themselves months behind on rent. To make some quick cash, he agrees to escort two criminals through the chemical plant he used to work at, so they can rob the playing card company next door. To conceal his identity so no one connects him to the robbery, the criminals get him to wear a special red helmet. A week later, the three go through their plan once more before the robbery later that night, working out all the minor details. A couple of police officers approach them and tell the former engineer that his wife has died in a tragic household accident when the baby bottle heater she was testing short-circuited. With his wife and unborn child gone, the man tries to back out of his deal with the criminals, only they won't let him, threatening to kill him if he backs out. At the plant, the three men alert security almost instantly, something the former engineer says they must have beefed up since he left. The guard calls in more men to the rear bays, and as the criminals try to make their escape, they are gunned down. Disoriented from the red helmet and still being fired at, the engineer continues running onto a catwalk. He is confronted by Batman, who has arrived at the scene, and out of fear, jumps off the catwalk into the plant's vat of toxic waste material to escape. After being swept into a pipe, the man finds himself on the outside. He takes off the red helmet due to the burning pain of his face, and begins laughing, driven insane by the events of this tragic day, as well as the chemical concoction. His skin has been bleached white, his lips stained with red, and his hair dyed green. The Joker has been born. In the present day, Commissioner Gordon and his daughter Barbara hear a knock at the door as they are sorting through some old newspaper clippings. To Barbara's horror, the man on the other side is the Joker, who proceeds to shoot Barbara in the spine as she falls through the glass coffee table in front of her dad. Gordon comforts Barbara as he tries to attack the Joker, but his goons manage to incapacitate him. Joker then begins to undress Barbara and takes out a camera. Batman visits Barbara, who is now paralyzed, at the hospital, and is told by Harvey Bullock that the Joker had taken pictures of her after the attack, in the nude, which doesn't sit well with him. He confronts her as she awakens, and she tells Bruce to save her father, no matter what, and that the Joker has taken things too far this time. Gordon awakens at the abandoned amusement park to find himself surrounded by Joker's deformed henchmen, who strip him down and parade him about like an animal. Joker forces him into the ghost train and makes him view giant blown-up photos of his wounded and undressed daughter. Once the ride is over, Joker and his henchmen ridicule Gordon as if he were part of a freak show, calling him an average man, a frail, pathetic, and unremarkable creature, seemingly doomed to insanity when too much weight is placed on them. Joker sends an invitation to Batman and Admit 1 to the Bonus Brothers Carnival and Amusement Park. The Dark Knight arrives in his sexy and sleek Batmobile, a classic design, so awesome, and confronts the Joker, his arch-enemy. The two clash in a duel of the freaks, with Joker getting the upper hand and falling back to the park's funhouse. Batman rescues Gordon, who tells him that the Joker tried to take his sanity, and that he wants the clown brought in by the book, to show him that their way works. In the funhouse, the Joker begins to lecture Batman, telling him that the world is irrational, inherently insane, one big cruel, demented joke. He feels he and Batman are one and the same. Both of them had one bad day that drove them to lunacy, veered them onto a different course. The Dark Knight manages to flank the Joker by breaking through the funhouse mirrors. The clown believed he had succeeded in driving Gordon insane, but Batman tells Joker he failed, and that ordinary people don't crack under pressure, only the man the Joker was did. Joker pulls Batman's cowl over his eyes, which gives him an opening to smash Batman in the back of the head with a 2x4. Before Joker can finish him off with a knife, the Caped Crusader manages to block his attack and send him flying out of the funhouse's back door. Despite everything the Joker has done, Batman still tries to reach him. He doesn't want their war to continue, as it will result in the death of one or both of them. He offers to help him, rehabilitate him, which might be the last time Joker gets this chance to make things right. Joker tells Batman it's too late, far too late, and that this whole situation reminds him of a joke. These two inmates at an asylum are sick of the place and want to get out. They climb to the rooftop to make their escape, but there is a narrow gap between the asylum's roof and freedom. The first inmate jumps the gap no problem, but the second doesn't even try, because he's afraid to fall. So, the first one shines a flashlight over the gap, and says to the other that he can walk along it. The second guy shakes his head and says, "What do you think I am, crazy? You just turn it off while I'm halfway across." The Joker begins laughing, and so does his arch-foe, one of the very rare occasions Batman laughs, let alone smiles. The two men continue laughing in the dark as the police sirens wail, with all sound ceasing, and we get another close-up of a rain puddle. So Batman the Killing Joke, does it deserve all the admiration and praise it gets? I think so. As an origin for one of the greatest villains in comic book history, I find it to be quite effective. It gets the job done, and tells its story in a very fascinating way. The Joker's origin is made somewhat sympathetic, depicting a failed comedian, in love, about to start a family, forced into crime to provide for them, hopefully getting a chance to start over. Of course, it all comes crashing down, one by one, which pushes him over the edge, and he loses his mind. That dip in the vat of chemicals didn't help either. Joker is only made sympathetic to an extent, however, because you get a sense that he was like this all along, different than most people. The origin depicted in this story could be one of several as well. It might not be true. Joker himself states that his past could be one way or another. He doesn't really remember, so all these flashbacks we are shown might not have happened the exact way we see them unfold. They might not have happened at all. They are told through the mind of the Joker, and he is an unreliable narrator. We can't believe anything he says. Like I had mentioned earlier, Alan Moore doesn't like this story, and believes it is one of the weakest works of his career. While I don't agree with that, I find a few of his other projects less interesting, or dare I say even more overrated, than The Killing Joke is painted out to be at times, especially from the writer himself. I can see why you may think this. Going back to it, Moore believes this story doesn't have a whole lot to say, that the narrative doesn't give the reader anything tangible they can apply to the real world. The Killing Joke, for all intents and purposes, is simple escapism, exaggerated fantasy. Moore's writing usually has more to it than that. There are stronger underlying themes to it all, and when comparing The Killing Joke to some of his other work in this regard, yeah, it may seem to fall a little flat in that department. Even the stuff describing the world as irrational, inherently insane, one big joke that humans are crazy and are turned crazy by it, all of this stuff is pretty much nonsense, coming from a crazy person himself. It's a broad way to look at everything, a generalization, an over-exaggeration. It may seem deep and thought-provoking, but it's not. It comes off as forced and even pretentious. The fact that Joker is an unreliable narrator means that the flashback sequences, a decent chunk of this story, can be viewed as disposable as well, because they may or may not have really happened. Despite being one of the most memorable parts of this narrative, all of it is essentially a waste of time if you really think about it. And Batman's reason to speak with Joker in the first place, to just talk with him, may seem like a bit of a stretch for his character. Why would he take such a pointless attempt at rehabilitating the Joker when he probably has 1,000 other more important things he could be doing with his time at that moment? Now, of course, I have been nitpicking the shit out of all of this, but it's because I'm trying to understand the reasoning behind Alan Moore not liking this story, and it's something that finds its way into my mind every time I revisit this comic. It probably comes down to a combination of everything I just mentioned. The Killing Joke has a more fantastical and exaggerated approach to its characters and themes, compared to a lot of Moore's other work. You can apply a lot of it to the real world, and that's something he tends to value in his storytelling approach. I get that, and I get why he wouldn't like it as a result. But I still value superheroes and superhero stories a lot more than Alan Moore does in this day and age, and anyone else who feels the way I do about these characters will most likely view this story as great too, phenomenal even. Yes, it's a little more watered down than some of Moore's other work, but that doesn't mean it's not still amazing, especially in comparison to a lot of other storylines found within the medium. Is it shameful that his worst is better than a lot of other writers' best? Maybe, but probably from the eyes of him only. It's not his fault, he's just so damn good. Batman the Killing Joke is a satisfying read. It's not too long and easily digestible. I recommend it to anyone thinking about reading comics for the first time. It's a great place to start, especially with Batman. I think it's fascinating how it analyzes the relationship between Batman and the Joker, making them very similar in terms of origin, the result of one bad day, and was definitely a major influence for the relationship the two had in the 1989 film directed by Tim Burton. The artwork by Brian Bolland, as well as the coloring, depending on the edition of the story you're looking at, is simply incredible. The immense detail, facial expressions, color palette, bizarre and unsettling imagery, it all makes for some of the most memorable visuals you'll ever see in the medium, at least in my opinion. That image of Joker holding his head with his fingers through his hair, the blood coming out of his eyes and mouth, it's one of the most striking images in comic book history. Look at that fucking thing. Wow. Before I end this review, I want to discuss the final moments of The Killing Joke, which has been a topic of discussion for decades, ever since the story came out. After Joker tells Batman his joke, and the two men are seen laughing as it pans down to the rain puddle, some believe the scene is depicting just that, the two of them laughing. However, others think that it's depicting Batman choking the Joker to death, theorizing that the story's title, The Killing Joke, is a reference to this moment. The ending is left quite ambiguous, I guess. Even the artist Brian Bolland hasn't clearly revealed what actually happened, but I think he's just fucking with people at this point, because he can, and they're gullible. Why on earth would Batman just kill the Joker in cold blood, choke him to death? Because he made him laugh? Because of what he did to Barbara and Jim? Because he doesn't want to be rehabilitated? I never once thought Batman killed the Joker here, broke his lifelong vow to not end a life. It doesn't make any sense to me, the thought never crossed my mind. Even the artwork never hinted at this in my opinion, it clearly shows them just laughing. I feel fans who have theorized that Batman is killing the Joker are just looking too far into it, believing something is there when it clearly isn't, and again, I think Bolland is just fucking with people. Why wouldn't he at this point? Anyways, Batman the Killing Joke is one of the best Batman stories out there. I feel it's a must-read to anyone who enjoys the character, even though its writer, Alan Moore, views it as one of the worst things he's ever done. We as fans know better, because I mean we still enjoy superheroes, don't we? Alan Moore does not, at least it doesn't appear to be. Batman the Killing Joke is a one-off story, it's a standalone narrative, but its influence on the comic book industry cannot be understated. Within Batman stories specifically, it led to Batgirl's retirement as a character, at least for a while, with Barbara becoming the computer hacker Oracle behind the scenes, an idea that has found its way into various forms of media over the years. Following The Killing Joke in 1988 and A Death in the Family later that same year, the Joker rose to a whole other level of villainy. He was the one responsible for paralyzing Barbara Gordon, as well as killing the second Robin, Jason Todd. Both of these moments have been cemented in comic book history, two of the most iconic moments to ever happen within Batman stories, and they made the rivalry between the Dark Knight and the Clown Prince of Crime more personal than it had ever been before. This has been NerdGasm. I hope you enjoyed my review of Batman the Killing Joke. I want to thank Dorian Malia once again for nominating this storyline over on Patreon.com. Every month moving forward, I will be doing polls to determine future comic book and video game reviews that you will see on the channel. If you want to be a part of these polls and cast your vote, all you have to do is become a patron, joining the $1, $3, or $5 tier. I have polls for the July videos up already on my Patreon page, and you will have until the end of June to participate. Thanks again for watching, and I will see you all in the next one. Take care.